Hi, everybody. Welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you're not aware, Core Recruitment is an international recruitment company, and we specialize in mid to senior appointments across our sectors for exec and non-exec roles. Now, we are running this interview series because we want to inject some positivity into the sectors that we operate across, and we're speaking to some phenomenal business leaders from different facets of organizations who are doing really interesting and innovative things. So if you've got anybody who you might want to recommend to kind of like take part in the series, or you may want to take part yourself, then please do get in touch. All of the content that we put together is available on our website, which is www.corerecruitment.com if you want to log in. Now, I am extremely lucky today to be joined by Kirstie Loveridge, who is going to be chatting to us. And just to get us kicked off, because we've got a database that obviously goes back forever. And 23 years ago, 23 years ago, we were having conversations about catering managers and commercial managers for Epsom and this and that, and the next thing. And it's like, and you just kind of go like, I mean, that's 23 years. I mean, where did that time actually go? It's absolutely insane, right?
Oh my goodness, you make me feel really old, but I know, right? Crazy
It's insane.
time.
And I want to open this off by saying congratulations on the promotion, because you are now Chief People Officer International for AEG, which is everything outside of America, which is phenomenal, right?
Yeah, thank you very much. Delighted. It's a great business, and I'm really proud to be part of it. So yeah, new challenges ahead.
New challenges ahead, absolutely. Now, it feels like to get us kicked off, the trend globally seems very much that everybody is craving live experiences. And in preparation for today, I obviously looked up your financial information and all of that kind of stuff. And you guys have just announced kind of like obviously about the O2's performance. 2.9 million tickets sold for the O2 last week. I mean, the town that I grew up in Southwest Scotland had 4,000 people in it, just to put this into context. I don't even know what the multiple is, but that is absolutely insane. And I think it's up 19% or something like, in the kind of like, the year previous. And
Yeah,
that's just one venue. Could you just give us kind of like a little bit of insight into the rest of the business and how it's performing for us?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, look, let me just start with let finish off that bit about the O2. I mean, officially the world's busiest music arena, 239 events last year, which, yeah, as you said, is an uplift of 19% of the previous year, which was also a record-breaking year. So, yeah, I mean, live experiences are still one of the last things I would say people are willing to give up.
Mm.
6 years on from the pandemic, and there is still a deep appetite for together in real life and people really wanting those meaningful moments that you get when you're at a live music entertainment space. So, I suppose that's really kind of sets a scene for us because we've come off the back of our third consecutive year of record breaking growth. So, yeah, full of positivity here at AEG across Europe. Landmark year, expanding in new territories, opening new venues, acquired and launched 3 festivals. The list goes on. So, yeah, no, really delighted.
Excellent. Really glad to hear that. Now, you just alluded to a little bit there because I think for me and a lot of other people, when you think about AG, you do think about the O2. But in terms of kind of like the size and scope and scale of the business, both in America and outside of the States, give us a little bit about kind of like, what you guys operate. And I guess also kind of like, I know that you're doing massive amounts of expansion in Asia at the moment as well. So it'd be great to get some insight about where the hotspots are.
Yeah, definitely. So, in short, AEG is a world leader in live sport and entertainment. And we operate some of the biggest and best venues in the world. We talked about the O2 in Germany. We have the Uber Arena. We've got the Uber Eats Music Hall, Barclays Arena in Hamburg, the Accor Arena in Paris. Just in terms of globally, we have an ownership or a stake in over 100 venues worldwide. So,
Wow.
flagship is crypto.com in LA, and our newest arena is the IG Arena in Nagoya in Japan. So, aside from our venues, the business, we're also a leading promoter of artists, and run an incredible portfolio of festivals, as well as owning several sports teams. Um, and a ticketing technology business as well. So Access, which is also currently on a huge growth trajectory. So like in short, how do we capture it? And I suppose it's all about us creating unforgettable live experiences. And from my side, focused on the people behind the scenes who make all of this sort of stuff happen.
Yeah, I mean, operating kind of like a global business with all of those multiple moving parts. I mean, how do you even start to manage a sports team? I mean, no idea, but you've got three of them, Kirstie, so best of luck with that.
It is, yeah, it is. Luckily, we have dedicated experts in each of our sectors that we operate in. So, ice hockey is very different from soccer. And, the teams there are just phenomenal at what they do. So, yeah, it's a definite game of moving parts.
Absolutely. But from like a challenge perspective, from the people side of things, like, operating that type of global business, can you just talk us through some of what you have to face on a daily basis?
Yeah, there's definitely no 2 days are the same, right? So I think probably first of all, whilst scaling at pace, and I've been at AEG for 15 years this year, and it genuinely has grown and changed shape along the way. But I suppose you would expect me to say this, but it is so true that important to us is the people remain super central to what we're doing. And this growth trajectory only really works when your colleagues feel valued and included and supporting. So, we're not perfect. We've come a long way, and I think probably some of the challenges is really strengthening your culture at the same speed as business development. And that kind of momentum really kind of sharpens the business commitment to kind of the inclusive people practices along the way. So, everything from setting the tone at the top to making sure inclusion is a shared responsibility. It's a continuous journey, I think, and one where we continually have to check ourselves to make sure we're listening and learning and evolving along the way. I think our sort of, if I focus on probably two of the challenges, I think it's that constant challenge between global and local.
Mm-hmm.
We are definitely not a one size fits all culture. And we operate a highly matrixed business. So I think simplicity at its key for global people management is probably one of our strengths, but also sees us constantly put a focus on probably no more than 5 or 6 global programs that support the culture. And then having, we have some super simple values and a global mission, which simply is to give the world a reason to cheer, right? So you've got to keep that at the core of everything you do, whilst, people have a huge expectation of a global business like AEG. Within my remit, we employ over 2,500 people. They're either salaried, part-time, full-time, as well as sort of event-based staff. So simplicity is key to making sure people feel connected within AEG. But also it's around being respectful and having different concepts and different programs that differ by country. And we're good with that, right? Because that's what we've chosen to do. We've chosen to have businesses in different countries, and it's respectful and it's the right thing to do. The legal frameworks are set up, but we want to tailor those efforts without diluting those simple but key to our success, the values and kind of what we're all about.
That's amazing. Amazing. Now,
And then our second challenge, I suppose, is also with that cultural dominance in some of their head office countries and states, right? So in America, a large amount of our workforce is based in LA, and in Europe and in the international, a large amount of our workforce is based in London. So you've got that constant push and pull of like cultural dominance where the large majority of your workforce is based, but a growth mindset of, let's acquire businesses like last year in Norway. But it's absolutely key that we respect that culture and values and, that in those markets. So it is a constant push and pull, but you know, I think we are proud of the progress we've made, especially in the last couple of years. So, but a constant journey, I think.
Excellent. Now, as I mentioned, kind of like start like 23 years ago, like, is when we kind of like, started speaking when you were with Compass Group. And there seemed, and as a recruiter, you kind of get this from kind of like certain organizations at certain times that there's a group of people or a cohort who all just go off and do like amazing things and kind of come out after it. And it's something, I don't know if it's about the leaders who are there at the time or if everybody spurs each other on or something like that. But it just seemed to be kind of like, there's a whole group of you who've gone off and done kind of like, phenomenal things. Could you tell us like, what was it about that business, that time, that culture, that kind of like thing that you think kind of generated that?
Yeah, I mean that when you asked me that question, it really took me back to an amazing time of my life. Like, and I am super grateful. I spent 12 years in that business and really grew up in it. Started literally as a student whilst I was at University of Surrey, helping book staff for major events, right? And left a mum and responsible for a really big part of that business. What do I boil it down to? I genuinely think back in the day, it started with a managing director seeing potentials in students and investing in development. And I hold that so key now as a mum of a 19-year-old. I have this sort of burning ambition to make sure every youngster spends some time in our industry, right? I
Mm,
think growing up in that sector just fills me with really great memories, lots of friends along the way. And as you said, super proud of all their successes within the sort of broader sports, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality sector. And I think, reflecting on it, a lot of that culture was initially created in those sort of major events, greenfield sites. Um, Great living examples kind of work hard, play hard, but also that planning and execution of kind of supporting events from sort of Cheltenham Gold Cups to Grand Nationals, Royal Ascots, Henley, kind of gave me that first hand in the moment people management experience. um you kind of you had to deal with every type of person and every need, whether that was getting the right number of staff at the golf tournaments, or how are they all getting there, and where are they staying, and what are they wearing, and what are they eating. But also for me as a people leader, you were super visible in that
mm,
business, so you had to become acutely aware of your actions, your behavior, and the impact they have, and at a super young age, right? Went out straight from uni into that role as a staffing manager. And yet you look back on those days and I just think, oh my goodness, the skills that I got in a really practical environment. I could probably reel them off, but like, the first ones that come to mind: problem solving, creative thinking, but like decision making when you're in a greenfield site and you've got all sorts of things about to all these thousands of staff about to arrive. And I just think being given that accountability and responsibility
yeah.
at a young age in a highly pressured environment probably set us all up for success, right? I just think, and you're part of that really small operational team that creates these amazing moments. And then that kind of set you up to go into the acquisition world, encompass purchasing these sort of smaller entrepreneurial businesses, and also that sort of buying and selling, but also that mobilization, demobilization of catering, which just was a fantastic grounding in people and culture management. So I'm a huge believer that everybody should work in the service industry as a rite of passage, just to gain some of these valuable life skills.
I completely agree. I think that's really spot on. In terms of like your journey through Compass or other organizations, that side of things, either inside the organization or kind of like through mentors or coaching or anything, like who's really inspired you and what have you got from them in terms of that process?
I think probably if I'm coming out the last question, both of them were from Compass days. My first MD, James Murphy, still
Mm,
really good friend now, and he's always been a fantastic mentor of mine and others. Always get that positive motivational message from him, whether he's read an article, seen me quoted, posted on LinkedIn. And what did I learn from James? I mean, how to be the most tough commercial operator and just an expert in turnaround business. Was phenomenal. Also taught me to be a lover of early mornings and, instilled in me to get into a pension scheme at 21 years old when I was skint and had no money for my rent, but also took from him, the key understanding that being on time is being late, and I'll never forget it. And so James definitely, and then, I wouldn't be the HR professional that I am today without the support and guidance of Vicky Williams, who and are friends of, people director currently at the LTA. I
yeah,
mean, she should be credited with the success of so many of us,
yeah,
from building that sort of best in class people management team, empowerment, org design, L&D, and just a really good mentor for HR
yeah,
and people
absolutely.
management.
Absolutely. We hear her name coming up a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot.
There's a lot of us grateful for Vicky.
Absolutely. Now, especially within the kind of current economic climate, not every business is doing as phenomenally well as AEG. Like, lots of individuals are unfortunately getting made redundant and this and that, and the next thing. And I'm one of those things that, sure, especially as running a global business, you'll see this as well. But we've got business in the States and in America. It's like almost when failure comes up, you wear a badge kind of saying like, I failed and I've learned this from it and it's great. And because we live in the UK and we're more demure and all of that kind of stuff. It's kind of like, I think people take like, failure much more personally. So I always think it's a really important thing to talk about failure and what you learned from it. Could you give us an example of something which maybe hasn't gone 100% according to plan and how you got through it, Kirstie?
Yeah, and I love this question. I think, it's only, as you just said then, it's only when you really take time to reflect that, you understand that those failures created the growth opportunities. And listen, there are many mistakes I've made, and unfortunately, within the world of people management and HR leadership, some of those hardest lessons have probably ended up in employment tribunals, even though when we truly believed we were doing the right thing. So, I think probably whilst, throughout various stages of my career, younger years, definitely wearing your heart on your sleeve when making decisions, and kind of becoming super emotional about that. And then I think there's sort of learnings along the way. I've had that really fantastic opportunity in my career to work in really big corporate like Compass, to then take some time and work in a startup of where I was a shareholder in that business, now to a privately owned organization. And I think there are definite learnings throughout each of those that I've been lucky enough to take. But I think if I was to pin it down to one, I think not being strong enough to have a voice to call out behaviors at a younger time, but now recognizing that and being able to do it in a very empathetic, authentic way is definitely the growth of those failures. So hopefully
Nice.
that answered that question.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I was going to ask for an example if you want to give one, or
Well, I'll leave the employment tribunal ones out, but I think especially in the world of inclusion,
hmm,
and just that behaviour that is shown from different leaders at different times, and just how that can affect a business. So there's probably not. Again, I won't go into the specific details, but just recognizing that behaviors really do start at the top of an organization,
totally.
and are so critical that they filter down and the right behaviors. But also, no one can get through a career without making some mistakes and failures. And I think owning it and really having accountability and responsibility to own it, and change it, I think, is probably the growth out of it all.
Absolutely. Now, we've mentioned a little bit about kind of that starting level and kind of like that everybody should kind of like start off in hospitality. Hospitality at the moment specifically isn't always getting the best press, kind of like in the UK. So in terms of kind of like, what skills and mindsets you think are most important to the next generation coming through of hospitality leaders, what do you think is most important?
Oh, you would expect me to say this, but it's, we've never worked in a world where it's as human centric as it is. And so, next gen of leaders will always work in a world that's more global, more digital, more unpredictable. But I think for me, I would hold that human centric, leadership, the ability, if I could gift everybody something, the ability to have difficult conversations whilst, being empathetic, authentic is absolutely key for me. Learning's going to continually be critical. Fast learning, I think, is going to be continually critical. And therefore, you're kind of in that, what can I give people? And it would be emotional intelligence skills. So, I grouped it together. I went, oh, mindset, has to be an inclusive mindset. You've got to lead with purpose. It's got to be a growth mindset. And you've got to continue to be agile, especially in the hospitality and wider sector. Like, the one thing I probably learned quite quickly is change is constant. I know that sounds a bit textbook, but it truly is. And you've got to be good with that. So that's a mindset piece. And the skills I've kind of talked about, I think empathetic, authentic, but you've got to remain curious, I think, because you've got to continually look for the new and the change in all of this. But if everybody came out and went into a first leadership role going, I now know how to have a difficult conversation, but I've made a decision, I think would be helpful, especially to all of those people leaders that you find along the way.
Absolutely. Love that. On that same trend of kind of like, things which are coming up in the future, and I mean, technology, AI, AGI, like with you guys being experienced with operations, like what are you most excited about coming up over the next 2 to 3 years in terms of changes, technology, that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's always about people first innovation to me. And if it helps people to work better together, then I'm in, right? And that could be tools that improve collaboration, more flexible ways of working, or experiences that help teams feel connected and supported. As I sort of said earlier, AEG is a complex matrix organization, but in terms of innovations, anything that can strip back layers, share data and information in a way that truly lands cross-functionally is super key to me. And I think if I can give you an example of what I really mean there, I think a great example for me is kind of internal communication measurement tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, but it helps to ensure that our communications are both visually cohesive, effectively on brand, but also that the message lands. And that's been a huge, the impact for that has been huge for us. Simply for the first time, we can really test our assumptions, learn from real data, and kind of be able to pivot our strategy accordingly. And in its really simplest form, every Friday for as long as I've been in AEG, we send out a weekly newsletter, really lighthearted, really kind of photocopy a chat moment. People first wrap up of the week, right? And it's always been one of those things that people love it. So, you can't change a winning formula. But now I can really prove it through these tools. Gets 97% engagement.
Wow.
On Friday. Unheard of, right? And like most, I like to think I'm largely right, but being able to prove it in a people management leader way, it's even better. So, if I go back to what innovations kind of really excite me, it's joining the dots. It's the data that improves the collaboration. It's just, and keeping it really simple. Like, that's a really simple example, but now, like, let's keep doing more.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Now, we do a big event every year for International Women's Day, and we do lots of activation activity and all of that kind of stuff around. And to your earlier point about lover of early mornings, early bird gets the worm, and all of that kind of side of things, I've been trying for the past 5 years to get you involved in this International Women's Day side of things, because I know that you do so much within kind of female leadership and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like January, no, November, no, 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 all of that side of things. So I am going to be putting this out as part of International Women's Day as well, as the leadership side of things. But I know you've got kind of like lots of thoughts around kind of like, what we can be doing to encourage more female leadership within the sector as well. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on that for your closing question.
Yeah, no, definitely. And listen, I am a massive advocate. And listen, let's talk, because I would love to help. I think in terms of, there's a couple of things for me initially that I would say. Firstly, it's got to start with being really intentional and recognizing this is a long game. This isn't a one and done. How do you encourage more female leadership, right? This is about spotting that potential early. That's, I think back to that graduate days with those female leaders that were part of that, and someone taking a bet on you. But also, more importantly to me, Christian, is that someone made sure that my voice was heard and that I had a seat at the table. And like, you can set with as many recruitment targets or as you want, but if you're not empowering the females in your organization to have the seat at the table, so every leader in this sector, look around every time you're in a meeting and question yourself, have I got the right people here? Have I taken out the expert because I need their boss in the meeting? No. Go back and get that expert in the room, because that is the way we make sure women are getting access to the right opportunities, the right sponsorship, and also the right stretch roles, right? Because guess what? They'll end up with the project. They'll end up being able to action it, being able to deliver it. And then, it's not just about mentorship, but it's about real advocacy. So like, that would be starting point. Flexibility hugely matters, right? And the more we normalize the different ways of working and the different leadership styles, and the more inclusive leadership becomes. And, as I've said, visibility is key, right? You can't be what you can't essentially see. So when every woman can help other women leading at every levels, it starts to shift really what's possible. Make sure those right people are there. And, the sector and AEG have made real progress. There's still a lot of work to do, but it's on all of us to just keep pushing that forward.
Excellent. Thought that was brilliant. I will definitely hold you to, I have it on video now, so I will definitely be holding you to IWD this year in some guise or form. So thank you very much once again for hopping on. Thank you very much for sharing all of the insight. I think AEG is the company that, no idea there was 100 sites, no idea about the size and scope of the organization, no idea there were 3 sports teams. I'm slightly obsessed with that now.
We're definitely not the washing machine company, the white goods company. No offense to them, but there's a different AEG, even though people still phone our reception weekly trying to get their fridge freezer sorted out.
Really? Why are they having technical difficulties? I worry. I wonder. But thank you very much once again, and congratulations once again on the promotion. It's very well deserved.
Thank you so much.